Good morning once again. Okay, our first session is going to be introduction to ITIL. Okay, so before we directly jump on to technical things, okay, I know our objective is to learn more about ServiceNow and then components within it. Okay, but please remember before we talk about any technical components, it is always supported by some process behind it. Okay, and we are building product just to make sure we are trying to eliminate some pain point, right? So if you are trying to learn about ServiceNow will help you to remove or facilitate to manage your IT infrastructure in a better way. Okay, so when I said your IT infrastructure in this enterprise world, like in any business, which will be always backed up by one or other IT component, right? You pick up a banking domain. A banking domain would not be sustained if we do not have a proper IT infrastructure behind it. You pick up a retail stores or any other one. So if we do not have a proper supply chain management and proper intuitive experience related digital experience kind of tools are unavailable, then that will not be successful. You pick up e-commerce, which will be completely backed up by IT infrastructure behind it. So you pick up any business in this latest world, which will be always backed up by one or other IT component behind it, right? So now our core objective is to make sure these IT components are properly functioning. Okay, they are properly operated. That's our goal. Okay, so when we are trying to make sure something is functioning, in a good shape, so we always need to make sure we are backed up by best practices. Okay, let me pick up a small example here, and we would like to build a proper building. Okay, maybe you are trying to build a big infra. Okay, when I said real infra, so when you are trying to build some high-rise building, okay, you cannot simply go ahead and then construct it. Okay, and you will have to have some best practices captured. Okay, what are how the previous buildings were structured, or what did you learn from them? Okay, then how would you use those best practices in the building the new high-rise building? So in each and every aspect, the core bare minimum thing that you do is you will always pick up the best practices, right? Now I'll pick up another example. Let us say, we always right now, being this COVID actually impacted most of us, invested a lot of time at home, right? So majority of us ventured into cooking. Even I spent a lot of time in experimenting in though I'm not really good at that, but we spent some time in preparing some dishes and some XYZ. So what happened, when we are trying to do something, you do some today, you try to attempt something today, you are preparing some dish, and end of the dish, it may be tasty or it may not be. But what happens is it, irrespective of output, that will give you an opportunity to capture one best practice. Okay, maybe you could have used some particular component at the end or in the beginning. You could have added some essences in the beginning or at the end. So when exactly where exactly you have to do, when exactly you have to do. So these are all the best practices that you will be capturing when you are venturing into something. Okay, similarly in the IT infrastructure, in the old days, we probably been following certain design principles. But after some after some time, what happens is you will be able to gain the uh, opportunity to document the best practices. For example, let us say uh, when when we were trying to implement solutions in 2002 and 2004. Okay, what happened was we were following typical three-tier architecture. During that span, we are the people will have to set up our CPUs, and then we have to install the databases, and we have to install the application servers, Apache Tomcat, XYZ, every single thing manually we're supposed to be doing. Okay, so at that point in time, when we, for example, those days if when we are installing Microsoft MS, SQL Server or DB2 server, we don't know what would be the bare minimum RAM requirements or hardware requirement or CPU requirement. What we've been doing, we are randomly picking up some of the infra components and we are stitching together and trying to implement applications on it. When we are implementing it, that's the time where we are learning. Okay, so okay, minimum RAM requirements are these. Okay, minimum hardware requirements are there. These are the prerequisites. So when we are when we are doing it for the next time, these are the prerequisites which will be helping us to quickly implement that solution. This is the best practice, right? So when we are when we are doing something, we will be capturing all the best practices. So those best practices will help you to follow whenever you are doing any activity in the later phase of time. That is how your ITL will help you in implementing IT infrastructure, in managing your IT infrastructure. Okay, ITIL means IT means information technology. Okay, I means infrastructure, L means library, IT infrastructure library. Okay, so this is the library which will help you with the set of best practices, will eventually help you to manage your IT infrastructure in a better way. Okay, our ServiceNow tool is completely based on these ITL best practices. Okay, so the technology that you will be learning in next few days, ServiceNow, which is highly dependent on these best practices. Okay, ITL best practices. So that is why you need to have little overview about this ITIL so that you will know these subsequent concepts easily. Okay, so when I said ITIL, right now in this session, we will be learning broadly about what is this ITIL, where exactly it is started, what are all the various versions which came up till today. So that's the high level view that you will be learning. And also when you started talking about IT ServiceNow overview, you will be able to better relate what exactly we spoke here. Okay, so ITIL actually started in UK. Okay, so initially this started in a commerce space. Okay, wherein they were talking about and how all these components need to be better managed. Okay, and eventually you probably have heard about Six Sigma. You probably have heard about lean best practices. Similarly, these ITL best practices also started somewhere in UK. Okay, in this particular UK, so these guys OGC, Office of Government Commerce, these guys, they started capturing all these best practices in the IT infrastructure and they created books. Okay, and they wrote those books in the beginning. And when they said books, these are public entity. This is not a private entity. You don't have to pay for these best practices to utilize you have patents for other components, but they have stitched all these best practices together and they offered as a books. Okay, if you want to go, you can go and procure those books and you can read through. But even the eventual phases, there is a demand happen on it. They have foreseen certain level of demand. They have improvised these best practices. They started venturing into various IT companies and then IT infrastructure world, and they started collaborating all the best practices and they started versionizing it. Okay, and they started version 1 in 90s. Okay, so in 90s, so they have released this version 1 and eventually later phase somewhere in 2000. Okay, so they have released version 2. So till version 1 there is only actually one book. Okay, till version 1 we have only one book which consolidatedly talking about all the best practices. But in the version 2 they have actually differentiated these into two books. Okay, one talks about support, one talks about design. Okay, so in terms of in the support phase, we usually talks about, for example, let us say I have already implemented IT infra. When I have already implemented IT infra, what I will do, I will manage it. So we will see incidents coming from it. We will see changes coming from it. We will be seeing like service desk operating it. There will be a help desk function who will be managing this IT infra. So all these things will be coming in terms of support. But in the delivery, so we will be having a long-term vision how these service level need to be managed between supplier and then customer. What should be the capacity of this particular infra? What are all the financial implications? What should be the availability that we are committing? What should be the continuity planning? And all these things will be discussed in the version 2 in 2 different books. But in version 3, they made it 5. Okay, they have recategorized into 5 different books called service strategy, design, operation. Okay, there is a mistake. Okay, this is a transition. Okay, so this is a transition. So, and operation, and eventually continual service improvement. Okay, why? See, the evolution of the service now is the background of ServiceNow is ITIL, as I said. How this is evolved, if you can look into it. Okay, at this stage, they talked about only support and they talked about delivery. Okay, at version 2. But when it comes to version 3, it is evolved to the maximum extent. And now in the version 4, they were talking about more digitalization. If you can see this now, even post-COVID, like this has been aggravated or accelerated. You can say that every single thing is moving into digitalized space. So now 4 is focusing more on the digital principles. Okay, version 3 and version 4 are kind of a very interrelated, but version 4 focused more on the digital experience. Okay, and now version 3, let me give you one simple example that will help you how the ServiceNow backbone, what we were talking about ITL, will help you to design anything in a right shape. Okay, let us say a simple example. Okay, now you being an entrepreneur, like you wanted to start off a kind of a small scale industry. Probably you can say a beauty product. Okay, one of my close circle, they eventually ventured into this beauty product. So I'm trying to pick up that as an example. Okay, so example is like they initially started off with one face cream example. Okay, now when they started this particular product, okay, they do not have a long-term vision. Okay, when I said long-term vision, what could be the potential demand? What happens if this is successful? They do not have that vision. Okay, fortunately, that product was become a huge success. Now, what happened is the product has been success, but they're not able to deliver it. But by the time the other competitors were able to capture this, the core principle of this beauty product, and they are able to produce it. And even like, though these guys are initially started off, they are not able to capture the market, and eventually they were able to sell their company to somebody else. Okay, what is the reason? If we deep dive and then perform the root cause analysis, the reason is when they started off a new product, they do not have a long-term vision. Okay, they have got a decent idea and they want to produce a product, but they produced it without having a long-term strategy. So that is why whenever you are having a product is supposed to be started. Okay, the companies like IBM, the companies like Microsoft, whenever they are starting up a new product, during the R&D stage itself, like they will put a lot of effort in terms of strategizing it. Okay, so what should be the, who is the target audience? What should be the product? How I should be, designing it? Like, what could be the potential of this particular product? So if, for example, like, tomorrow, if this scales up, if this is successful, whether I do not have required raw materials or not, whether do I have a required support framework or not, you need to have everything, in your portfolio, or I mean, should be ready for you to support in subsequent stages. Now you have long-term planning, everything is discussed in the strategy. Yeah, everything is ready. Then what happens is you will have to implement your strategy through the design. Okay, now you are coming into the actual tangible stuff. Okay, you have to design it. Okay, this is my product. Okay, this is my volumetric analysis. This is my packing principles. This is my supply chain strategy. Okay, so this is how I will be transporting it. This is how I will be making sure end user experience is good. So you will have to every single thing discussed in your design and should have proper detailed design and low level design. Okay, now you have strategy and your strategy is converted into design. Your design is approved. That's where you will be transitioning it. So which means you are producing it, you are giving a shape to your design. So you are implementing your strategy here in this stage. These three stages will be implementation of your basic principles that are discussed in your strategy. You are transitioning it. Okay, now your final product is produced. That's what you will be maintaining in your operational stages. So during your operational stage, you will come up with some again experiences, issues. So that should be again feeded into your strategy. Okay, that should be again feeded into your strategy. Okay, now let's say I'm venturing into construction business. Okay, so what happens is now as part of my construction business, now I started off I got some land. I'm trying to create a structure around. So what I have to do, I have to have a long-term strategy, how this building should look like. Okay, how my venture should look like, what are the basic things that I will be offering to my customers. So once I have everything in place, I will be designing my construction, I will be producing my construction, and eventually I will be operating it for first 2 years once I have hand over my construction to that society. So during the operational stage, I will come across some issues. Okay, those issues will be taken into my continuous service improvement. Whenever there should be again feeding into my long-term strategy. So whenever I'm producing new design, I will be taking all these best practices and making sure they are embedded into my long-term design. Right? So that's how your CSI always will help you to feed your details into strategy. Okay, so what if you understood this ITIL V3, how this is being structured? So these best practices are already there. At the same time, V4 is focusing while you are going through all these phases. So the focus is at this point in time, we are focusing about the output, but in this entire space, we haven't spoke anything around digitalization. But now everywhere, in every single area, at single stage, these days we were talking about more around automations, okay, and then machine learning, okay, and artificial intelligence. So all these things in one word, we are talking it as a digitalization, right? So ITL 4 is build focused and built on decades of our best practices experiences, okay, and then at the same time all these IT service management best practices are covered or surrounded with this digital focus. Okay, so with this digital focus it is wrapped up, and now the ITL 4 is much evolved with digital focus, right? So while we are doing the same sequential steps, while we are going through the same sequential steps, so our operational practices are surrounded or wrapped up with digital focus. Okay, when I said at any point in time, for example, during the strategy or during the design or during the transition or during the operations, so how and what are the fundamental practices or policies will be lying behind it is our ITSM practices. Okay, when I said ITSM practices, again they will be coming up here. Okay, the ITSM practices are talking more about your basic principles again. ITSM, incident, problem, change, release, configuration, service levels, okay, capacity, financial. So fundamental principles are always there. Okay, what exactly is changing is the way we are delivering these processes, the way we are delivering these best practices is what is always changed. So Your ITL best is like, core, okay, which will help you to strategize in the right way, which will help you to design, transition, maintain your structures. Okay, while you're doing this stuff, you will always come across best practices, again feed them into your strategy. So this is a continuous process. Okay, that is how ITL is evolving and also helping to implement these best practices to the customers using some tools. Okay, there are various tools coming up to implement these best practices. Okay, so one of such tool is ServiceNow. Okay, now this is where like you will be learning about ServiceNow. So ServiceNow is completely based on these ITL best practices. Okay, and ServiceNow is evolving alongside of this ITL, which is even like progressing faster than ITL progress. Okay, ITL like right now focusing more about these fundamental processes that we talked about, right? So wherever like you go within the ITL, like they talks about it, but the focus is slightly shifting. Earlier, like this is which talks more about stability. Now stability is already there, so everybody is offering like 99.9% of availability, okay, and then a cheaper price, okay, in terms of financial aspects. So every single thing is there, okay, but what is it in addition to that you can offer is digital focus. So that is now ITIL is talking about it. While we are talking about digitalization, while we are talking about ITIL best practices, what in addition to that ServiceNow is offering is, okay, venturing into various other practices like GRC, okay, security operations. So we will talk about all these individual offerings that are coming from ServiceNow. Okay, so at the end of session, the summary is ITL talks about best practices. ITL has gone through various versions. Okay, the latest version of ITL is V4. V4 is focusing more on the digitalization, and our ServiceNow tool is like completely based on the ITL best practices. Okay, at the same time, while ServiceNow is focused more on implementing ITL best practices, it is not just limited to, it is also ventured into various other processes. Okay, so that's about the basics of ITIL. What I request you is you can Google, okay, which is not the area which we will be focusing, but I always wanted to have my session started off with this particular ITL best practices, because we will be keep on using these ITL best practices word time and again. So that is why when we are talking about tool, we should know where this tool has been started off. What is the base for this tool? You learn any technology, you always need to know the fundamentals behind it. So that is why we are starting off with this particular piece. So with this, we will be moving on to the tool. Okay. So any questions you have so far? Anything you want to learn? Heaven, Pavani, any questions?
Nothing from my end.
Are you good?
Yes.
Okay. So Pavani?
No questions, sir.
Okay, no questions. Right. So now what I want you to do, like, before we start off is please open up your browsers, all of you. Okay, and follow what I've been doing here. So I want you to make this environment is ready. So we'll take a short break and then come back. Okay, so open up your browsers. Okay, go to this particular website. Go to this website. Developer.servicenow.com. Let me ping you here. After you have been here, for the first time, you have to sign up. Okay. Okay. If you are doing it for the first time, I think Pavani, this is first time you've been coming here. So click on it and quickly sign up. So just you have to provide your Gmail ID password to sign up. First name, last name, and then email ID, and then give a password and country and confirm it. And it will send out an email to your mailbox and just quickly activate it. Let me know once you have done it, Pavani.
No, sir.
Can you do it now or you will do it later?
Later, sir.
Okay, all right. So Hemant, you have done it, right? You have an ID, right, Hemant?
Yes, I have an ID.
Okay. So if you have an ID, okay, you have to come down to this place. Okay. So I'm recording it so you can use it, Pavani. So if you do not have ID, you have to sign up and then use your whatever the email ID that you are using it. Okay. And then password, of course, you should have got it during your sign up. Once you started off, you will be landed up with the developer portal. And the advantage of ServiceNow is everything is in cloud. Okay, there will be no limitation for you to start off something. Okay, and if you have procured an instance which will be already here or otherwise, I'm just releasing it for showing you so that I can show you how to request a new instance. Okay, because I have an instance. Okay, so if you're doing it for the first time, so this is how the portal look like for you. And to practice whatever we've been talking in the subsequent sessions, okay, you will have to request a new instance to go through. So if you click on it, ServiceNow will give you a new instance, okay, for your practice. So I'll talk about these versions, but before that, I want you to have an intuitive experience so that you will be connected to what I'm talking. Okay, so the latest version of ServiceNow is at San Diego. Select it and then request. Select it and request. So the new instance will be created in just a couple of seconds. Okay, so once that new instance is created and you can use it for your the new instance can be used for your learning. Okay, so these are the step-by-step approach for you to initiate a new instance. Okay, so quite easy. Step one, you have to come down to this developer.servicenow.com. Okay, and step two, you have to register. So once you have registered, you will have user ID and password. So that user ID password can be used to 1 second. I'll change this person. So once this particular for you website you have reached, so you can request a new instance, which I just showed you how to do that. Okay, once the new request is placed and the new instance will be set up in just a couple of seconds, being this is a cloud instance, automatically will be provisioned. So the provisioned instance will be used for your subsequent exercises. You can see that a new version, new instance has been generated. If I click on it, so you will be opening up a ServiceNow instance, which will be 100% same as your live instance. If you have been deployed into a project, if you started your career, so this is how you will be receiving an instance. The only difference that you will be noticing is like the name of the instance, but this is going to be exactly same as your live environment. There is no difference at all. Only difference is your live environment will be going through all the topics that we covering in next couple of sessions. So they will be adopting all these new requirements, implementing it, So they will be using the refined solution. Okay, the only difference is that, but the look and feel and then URL, every single thing is same. So, for example, if you are learning any other technology, this could be a gap. Okay, how the live environment probably look like. Okay, I'm learning in a classroom, whether my classroom lab environment is going to be same as a live environment or not. So you can remove all those apprehensions. So your live environment is exactly same as your practice environment. Okay, and whatever you wanted to do it in the live environment, you can 100% do it in your lab environment. Okay, so this is how you will be procuring a new instance using your ServiceNow developer program. Okay, so that's about like how to generate a new instance before we go into the next topic. Okay, so our next topic is like to get a fair overview about ServiceNow. Why you have to learn ServiceNow? Okay, what is the ServiceNow position in market? Okay, what exactly we spoke about in ITIL and how is it like mapped with ITIL? Okay, and who are the competitors in the market? What is ServiceNow high-level licensing process? And also how the ServiceNow is releasing these versions time to time, what pattern they are following. For example, if you are trying to showcase your experience as a some 2 years or a 3 years or like 1 year, how you can go back and then if, if interviewer is asking like what are the various versions that you have touched upon, you can fall back and then you can tell them that like for every 6 months service now do release a version. So according to that you can say yeah, this is the version that I started off. Okay, what would be the typical pattern of ServiceNow upgrades? Okay, and how they will be, what are all the various maintenance activities that can be part of? How ServiceNow is evolving. I said, though ServiceNow is highly bounded on ITIL best practices and ITIL processes, but it is not just limited to, it has been venturing into various other workflows. Okay, what are all those different workflows? So these are the concepts that we will be learning in our upcoming session. Okay, so before we start off with that particular session, as I said, like being this is a lot of talking, I want you to make sure like you're also receiving the content. Let's take a short break. Okay, a 10 minutes break, and we will regroup at 10:30. Okay,
Sure.
I'll be here for a moment. Okay, if anybody has any questions, I will be very happy to answer those questions and then we will regroup. Any questions?
Nothing from my answer.